Okay, greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition I want to call Plastic Alibis and Those Meddling Kids. And I'm going to start with the most harrowing tale from last week, and this is the story of Mohammed Ahmed Nader. And many of you may have seen the piece about how his family had to bury him twice. And this is after a bungling police investigation which led to a part of his body being found in a tumble dryer. Yes, a tumble dryer.
Flora Nader and her son were the only people to survive from the very top floor. Her husband Mohammed tried to escape but ended up jumping to his death.
Mohammed Sabr Nader's family believed they'd already laid him to rest. But now they're burying him for the second time.
This time is more difficult from the first time.
A few weeks ago, Flora received a phone call from the police saying a part of Mohammed's body had been found.
Essentially what happened is that, after the post-mortem, the police failed to identify the fact that one of Mohammed's body parts were missing. So when the family buried him the first time, he was incomplete. And it was only when a cleaning company found his missing body part inside a tumble dryer that they apologised, they got in contact, and he was reburied again. But this does really give us cause for doubt about the competency of the Metropolitan Police and their forensic investigation.
Controversy has long raged over the death toll of the Grenfell fire and how police handled the scene. The Met Police say it's among the most complex investigations they've ever dealt with. And this family's traumatic experience once again raises questions about how victims were recovered.
After 6 months, they just start cleaning. They found one piece of his bone in the washing machine.
The Metropolitan Police declined our request for an interview. They say an external cleaning company discovered the bone, and the post-mortem did not identify any part of his body was missing.
So every time I hear that 71 number, there's now a doubt, and it's becoming more than a reasonable doubt. I mean, I for one wish that Channel 4 had dug deeper into this.
Blasted meddling kids.
So what else happened last week? Well, Celotex is one of the plastic insulation manufacturers who created parts of the cladding that was used on Grenfell. They've actually come into the media spotlight because they've actually published a report saying that the government test of the fire safetiness of their products was actually missing some of the ingredients or some of the components. Now, this is quite a tricky one to get your head around. You see, when Celotex says that they found differences in the final test results and the components that were inside the report, what they're really saying is that if there's any more fires and it's been certified by a government body, well, hey, we're not to blame. Anyway, who knows? This could be as big as the VW diesel emissions scandal. The rigging of tests, it happens all the time.
And I would have made millions if it hadn't been for you meddling kids.
Now, last week also saw the Financial Times paint a lovely portrait of the Kensington and Chelsea leader, Elizabeth Campbell, in her simple but functional office. And I find it interesting whenever you see politicians kind of do these puff pieces to publications like the Financial Times, because essentially what they're doing is talking directly to their core audience. They can say things inside those pieces which they wouldn't say to the Sun or the Daily Mirror. So what does this portrait reveal of the thinking of Elizabeth? Well, she talks about how a lot of people died in the fire and how the council are responsible for rehousing family and friends. She also makes this comment about how activists from outside the area and unscrupulous lawyers are actually now making an environment that's potentially toxic to their progress. It's a really clever kind of attack on the support mechanisms of the community. It's a really clever way of saying, actually, if you dump everyone that's actually offering you any help or those who are working in solidarity with you, we'll house you and your friends. But whilst you have this help from outside, we're going to be in this combative mode.
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been for those meddling kids.
Anyway, last week the Independent was another tabloid that, I don't know, they've been really supportive of Grenfell, but this last piece about the growth in drug abuse. I'm not so sure about that one. Now the headline from the independent piece comes from health experts, and they're the ones who are actually saying that the Grenfell survivors are actually using drugs and alcohol to actually deal with the trauma. But this segue into the fact that it's the payments that are being given to the Grenfell community, which is actually financing this substance abuse. That's where I'm a little bit dodgy about. But that reminds me of the other story that came out last week, and that's essentially the deadline for the amnesty for people who are in the country illegally in Grenfell has expired. If some of the people who are being deported are core participants to the inquiry, which is the case, then how is it possible to argue that any meaningful search for justice is actually taking place?
Yes, and I'd have gotten away with it too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids.
But you see, whilst MPs are waxing lyrical on the issue, real people are suffering. Now, Winston Darris, for example, he was the pensioner who was actually living opposite the tower block when the massacre took place. And last week, The Guardian reported on how he actually collapsed with a heart attack when he was actually going back to check his things. Now, thankfully, due in part to The Guardian's coverage, thank you for the exposure, Winston has actually now been rehoused. But how many other Winstons are there? You see, whilst Elizabeth and her ilk are doing puff pieces for the Financial Times, there's some real issues affecting real people and real lives. Last week there was a protest after community group Westway 23 discovered that some of the land that was promised to the community was once again sold off to a private firm. This time a prep school, and I think it's a prep manager on one of these kind of trendy cafes.
I don't want to pret a munch here. Who wants to pret a munch here? Who asked them?
No consultation, there's been no kind of communication with the local community, so we can have our say.
We're here to show that, like, you know, it's never too late to take a stand, you know. Look, so much has been going on that you can't keep your eye on everything, you know, but we're still here.
They're going to be protesting again tomorrow on Tuesday and again on Friday, but they need our support, and without media coverage and media amplifying their voices, these people get away with it.
You blasted kids! Why didn't you mind your own business?
So last week I spoke about the Grenfell generation. Sadly, that also includes some of those that profited from the massacre. Now, if you think that last week MPs voted for a 3.5 billion refurbishment to the Houses of Parliament, yeah, 3.5 billion. Now, I'm not saying for one moment that it shouldn't be done, but it's the priorities, right? I mean, that story's vanished from the headlines really quick. 3.5 billion for the upgrade, another £500,000 to actually relocate themselves. Now, you might say, well, Toyin, you're being unreasonable. I don't think I am. I think if you think about Northamptonshire Council, which is actually virtually bankrupt because of the cuts, we're seeing councils who can't afford to secure the safety of their residents. Now, I know that many people think that all this activist talk is conspiracy stuff, and it's really interesting that, because yesterday there's a story about a secret Freemasons lodge, I kid you not, operating inside Westminster. At the same time, you're having Labour MPs arguing that the Freedom of Information Act should be strengthened, because this outsourcing is creating this kind of like shadowy world, which is very true, where a housing association actually was able to deny letting residents know what caused the fire in a flat. Residents are even being rebuffed when they're trying to find out whether toxic lead pipes are being used for their water supply. So yes, MPs can move off site whilst their lovely palace of Westminster is being refurbished, but at the same time you need to fix up the Freedom of Information request so that we can actually scrutinise you properly.
And I'd have done it too, if you kids hadn't have come along.
But I want to end with some good news. You see, not everybody in the Grenfell generation is on the bad side. Now in Hackney, we've just heard the news that 114 flats on Queensbridge Road are going to be given fire sprinklers. And this is a really good move, a very brave move, because there's going to be political consequences. The Mayor has actually announced that it's going to cost £20 million without government funding. So he needs to be commended. Also, there's the council in Hull that are actually stripping off the cladding off the tower blocks over there. Now, so they're putting the safety of their residents first. And finally, it's very cold out here and I haven't got gloves. I want to give a big props out to Moira, Clary and the Justice for Grenfell crew, who held a very important meeting last week. Sorry I wasn't able to attend, but give thanks to Grenfell Speaks. We saw the footage and really just discussing issues of what does justice look like and framing solidarity making us aware that we're all in this together. Grenfell community are not alone. So, as ever, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.